Let me tell you something right now. What happened in Indiana this week was never just about an elbow injury. It was never just about a player missing a game. And it certainly was never just about an entry on an injury report. What you're watching unfold is the result of something much bigger. You're watching what happens when an organization loses control of its own narrative. I'm Dre Fiber. This is Street Hoops. And today we're diving deep into why Sophie Cunningham's absence against Chicago sparked a firestorm across the basketball world, and why the trust between the Indiana Fever and their fan base appears to be eroding faster than anyone inside the organization wants to admit. Let's start with something Stephanie White herself once said. Before taking over the Indiana Fever, White publicly criticized the way social media narratives often dominate sports conversations. She argued that too much attention was being given to online speculation and not enough to the actual basketball being played on the court. She wanted discussion centered around the game itself rather than the endless cycle of rumors, reactions, and controversy. The irony is impossible to ignore, because the moment White accepted the Indiana Fever job, she stepped directly into the most heavily scrutinized position women's basketball has ever produced. This isn't a coaching job where criticism appears occasionally. This is a coaching job where every lineup decision becomes a headline, every substitution becomes a debate, every quote becomes a talking point, and every injury report becomes a national conversation. That's the reality of coaching a team built around Caitlin Clark. Now, let's talk about Sophie Cunningham. When news broke that Cunningham would miss the Fever's Commissioner's Cup matchup against Chicago due to a right elbow issue, the reaction was immediate and intense. Not because players never get hurt, not because elbow injuries are unusual, but because absolutely nobody saw it coming. Through the first portion of the season, Cunningham had been one of the team's most dependable contributors. She appeared in every game. She provided toughness, energy, perimeter shooting, and veteran leadership. Her production wasn't always reflected fully in the box score, but anyone watching Indiana understood her value. She had become one of the emotional engines of the team, and suddenly she was unavailable. No major incident had been publicly discussed. No obvious injury moment had gone viral. No post-game interviews suggested anything serious was developing. One day, she was playing regular minutes. The next day, she appeared on the injury report. Naturally, people started asking questions. And here's where the situation becomes complicated. During pre-game comments, Stephanie White explained that Cunningham's elbow had actually been bothering her for some time, and that treatment had already been ongoing behind the scenes. Think about that for a moment. If the issue had existed for a while, then this wasn't a brand new injury. This wasn't something that happened overnight. The team had been managing it internally. The public simply wasn't aware of it. Now, let me be absolutely clear. None of that proves anything suspicious occurred. Players deal with nagging injuries constantly. Teams manage medical situations privately all the time. That part isn't unusual. What is unusual is the reaction that followed. Because the moment fans heard the explanation, many immediately became skeptical. Not because of the injury itself, because of the organization announcing it. That's the real story. Trust, or more accurately, the lack of it. When fans trust an organization, injury announcements are accepted at face value. When trust disappears, every announcement becomes controversial. Every explanation gets questioned. Every detail gets dissected. And that's exactly where the Fever find themselves today. Whether fair or unfair, the organization has reached a point where many supporters no longer automatically accept official explanations. That's a dangerous place for any franchise to operate. Once skepticism becomes the default setting, even legitimate information gets treated like damage control. Every communication challenge becomes larger than it should be. Every injury update becomes a debate. Every coaching decision becomes evidence for someone's preferred theory. And social media fills the gaps. That's precisely what happened with Cunningham. The injury itself may be entirely legitimate. The recovery process may be exactly what the medical staff says it is. But because trust has been strained by previous controversies, the public response was never going to be simple. The Fever aren't dealing with one isolated incident. They're dealing with accumulated perception, months of headlines, months of debates, months of fan frustration, months of scrutiny unlike anything the WNBA has experienced before. And at the center of all of it sits Caitlin Clark, the league's biggest attraction, the player generating unprecedented attention, the athlete whose presence transforms ordinary regular season games into national events. That spotlight affects everyone around her. Coaches, teammates, executives, media members, everyone. Every story becomes bigger. Every controversy lasts longer. Every injury receives more attention. And that's why Cunningham's absence became such a massive discussion. Because Sophie isn't viewed as just another role player. She's become one of the emotional symbols of this Fever team. She's a competitor fans rally around. The teammate who brings toughness. The player willing to absorb contact, challenge opponents, and stand up for her teammates. She's the kind of player fan bases naturally gravitate toward. When someone like that suddenly disappears from a lineup, people notice. And when communication surrounding that absence feels incomplete or delayed, speculation fills the vacuum. That's not unique to Indiana. That's true in every sport. The difference is that Indiana operates under a microscope. Every move gets amplified. Every development gets magnified. Every explanation gets challenged. And unless the organization finds a way to rebuild confidence with its supporters, these situations are going to continue repeating themselves. Because trust works like a bank account. You earn it over time. You build it through consistency. You strengthen it through transparency. But when enough withdrawals occur without deposits, eventually the balance reaches zero. And once that happens, every statement becomes suspect. Every announcement becomes controversial. Every injury becomes a conspiracy theory, whether deserved or not. That's the environment surrounding the Fever right now. Not because of one elbow injury, not because of one press conference, not because of one player, but because years of attention, controversy, expectation, and scrutiny have combined to create a situation where every small story instantly becomes a massive one. And until that trust gap is repaired, the conversation won't be about basketball alone. It'll be about everything surrounding the basketball too. That's the reality facing the Indiana Fever today. And that's why a simple injury report turned into one of the biggest stories in the sport. And that's exactly why Sophie Cunningham's importance to this team goes far beyond statistics. She isn't simply another player coming off the bench or filling a role in the rotation. She's become part of the emotional identity of the Indiana Fever. When games get physical, when tensions rise, when opponents try to impose themselves, Cunningham is usually one of the first players stepping into the moment. She brings toughness. She brings energy. She brings the kind of edge that fan bases naturally rally behind. That's why Fever fans have embraced her so completely. They don't just appreciate her production. They appreciate what she represents. She plays with emotion. She plays with intensity. And perhaps most importantly, she plays with a visible commitment to her teammates. That connection matters, especially in a season where so much attention has been focused on chemistry, culture, and relationships inside the organization. And that's what makes the timing of this entire situation so interesting. Because Sophie Cunningham wasn't just any player involved in one of the biggest moments of the season. She was directly connected to it. Everybody remembers what happened against Washington. The Fever needed something special. The clock was running out. The pressure was enormous. And then came a play everyone is still talking about. Cunningham stood out of bounds with the ball in her hands. She surveyed the defense. She saw an opening. She fired a perfect pass across the court. Caitlin Clark caught it, rose up, and delivered one of the most memorable shots of the WNBA season. The arena exploded. Social media exploded. Basketball fans everywhere exploded. For a brief moment, everything felt simple. Clark hit the shot. Cunningham made the pass. The Fever got the win. End of story. Except it wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Because almost immediately, discussion shifted away from the shot itself and toward what actually happened on that final possession. Questions started appearing. Was the play designed exactly that way? Did players improvise? Was the shot part of the original design? Or did the moment evolve naturally as the defense reacted? Those questions gained momentum after comments began circulating from multiple players. At first, Cunningham publicly suggested that fans were overanalyzing the situation and indicated that the team executed the play as intended. Then comments from another teammate seemed to imply that the final sequence wasn't exactly how it had originally been drawn up. Suddenly, the conversation changed. Instead of celebrating a game-winning shot, people started debating competing interpretations of the same possession. And that's where perception becomes powerful. Because once conflicting explanations enter the public space, fans immediately start trying to determine which version is closer to reality. The reality, of course, may be far less dramatic than either side suggests. Basketball plays break down all the time. Defenses adjust. Players react. Coaches draw up one thing, and defenders force another. Great teams adapt. Great players improvise. That's part of sports. Some of the greatest moments in basketball history happened after a play stopped unfolding exactly as intended. What matters is the result. The problem for Indiana is that the organization no longer enjoys the benefit of automatic trust from large portions of its audience. That's the real issue, not the play itself, not the pass, not the shot. Trust. When fans trust an organization, minor inconsistencies don't become major controversies. When trust is damaged, every inconsistency becomes evidence. Every explanation gets analyzed. Every statement gets compared against previous statements. Every detail becomes important. That's exactly what happened here. A discussion that should have lasted one day turned into a week-long debate because people felt they were hearing different versions of the same story. And whether those differences were significant or not almost became irrelevant. The perception became the story. From there, attention naturally returned to Stephanie White. Because whether fair or unfair, every major discussion involving the Fever eventually circles back to the head coach. Every rotation decision, every lineup change, every substitution, every injury report, every late game possession, everything eventually finds its way back to White's desk. That's the reality of coaching the most watched team in women's basketball. The scrutiny never stops. And in many ways, White understood exactly what she was stepping into. Before arriving in Indiana, she openly discussed the dangers of social media narratives and the way online conversations can distort reality. She wasn't wrong. Sports discussions online often move faster than facts. Rumors spread quickly. Assumptions become accepted truths. And emotional reactions frequently overpower patience and context. Those challenges existed before she arrived. The difference is that now she's coaching the team sitting directly at the center of that storm. Every issue becomes amplified. Every controversy becomes national. Every disagreement becomes content. And that's what makes the Fever such a fascinating organization to watch right now. They aren't simply dealing with basketball questions. They're navigating the challenges that come with unprecedented attention. They're managing expectations that continue growing every month. They're operating under a spotlight brighter than anything the league has experienced before. That spotlight follows every player, every coach, every executive, every decision, which brings us back to the larger question. Why has a game-winning shot continued generating headlines long after the game ended? Because it wasn't really about the shot. It was about what people believed the shot represented. Some fans saw improvisation. Others saw execution. Some saw evidence of player instincts. Others saw proof of coaching design. And once those competing narratives formed, the conversation became impossible to stop. That's where things stand today. A memorable victory, a famous pass, an unforgettable shot, and a fan base still debating exactly how it all happened. The basketball itself lasted only a few seconds. The discussion surrounding it may last much longer. Let's be absolutely clear about something before we go any further. There is a massive difference between harassment and criticism. Those two things are not the same. They should never be treated as the same, and any serious discussion about the Indiana Fever has to begin there. When Alyssa Thomas and other players were subjected to racist and personal attacks during the Fever playoff series, that behavior was unacceptable. It was wrong then. It is wrong now. No athlete should have to deal with that kind of abuse simply for competing on a basketball court. Stephanie White was right to condemn it. Any coach with integrity would have done the same. But here's where the conversation becomes more complicated. When White addressed those issues publicly, the discussion often expanded beyond the specific problem of harassment and into a broader conversation about social media narratives, online commentary, and independent coverage surrounding the league, whether intentional or not. That created a situation where legitimate criticism and bad faith attacks could sometimes become blurred together in the public conversation. And that distinction matters. Because questioning coaching decisions is not harassment. Discussing roster management is not harassment. Analyzing injury reports is not harassment. Wondering whether organizational communication has been effective is not harassment. Those are normal parts of sports coverage. The reality is that The Indiana Fever exist in a completely different media environment than they did just a few years ago. The arrival of Caitlin Clark changed everything. Millions of new viewers enter the sport. Many of them did not come through traditional media channels. They came through YouTube. They came through podcasts. They came through social media. They came through independent creators who built audiences outside the legacy sports media structure. That audience is now part of the WNBA ecosystem. They're not a side story anymore. They are the story. They buy tickets. They purchase merchandise. They drive engagement. They consume content daily. They follow injury reports. They analyze rotations. They discuss strategy. They care deeply about the team. And with that investment comes scrutiny. Lots of it. That's simply the reality of modern sports. Every major league experiences it. The NFL experiences it. The NBA experiences it. Major League Baseball experiences it. Every organization that reaches a certain level of popularity eventually learns the same lesson. Attention brings questions. Questions bring criticism. Criticism brings accountability. And accountability requires transparency. That's the environment Indiana now operates within. Whether the organization likes it or not. Whether the coaching staff expected it or not. Whether anyone feels comfortable with it or not. The spotlight is permanent. That's why situations like the Sophie Cunningham injury become bigger than they otherwise would. Not because fans are irrational. Not because everyone is searching for controversy. But because people are paying attention. Very close attention. When communication arrives late, people notice. When explanations change, people notice. When public statements appear inconsistent, people notice. That isn't trolling. That's scrutiny. And scrutiny is part of being one of the most visible organizations in professional sports. Now let's talk about the irony that unfolded on the court. While all of these conversations were dominating social media, the Fever actually went out and won the basketball game. Without Cunningham available, Indiana still found a way to get it done. Caitlin Clark delivered another spectacular performance. Aaliyah Boston delivered one of the greatest games of her career. Together, they produced a historic statistical achievement that immediately entered the WNBA record books. The Fever survived. They improved their record. They kept momentum moving forward. On the surface, that should have been the story. And yet somehow it wasn't. Because while the team was winning on the court, the larger conversation remained focused on trust. Trust in communication. Trust in leadership. Trust in organizational transparency. That's the challenge Indiana faces right now. Winning games helps. Winning cures many problems. But winning doesn't automatically rebuild credibility. Those are separate issues. The Fever can win a basketball game and still leave fans with unanswered questions. They can celebrate a huge performance and still face criticism about how information was communicated. Both things can be true at the same time. That's what makes this situation so fascinating. From a purely basketball perspective, Indiana had every reason to celebrate. Clark continued proving why she's one of the league's biggest stars. Boston reminded everyone why she's one of the most dominant young players in the sport. The team showed resilience. The coaching staff earned a victory. The standings improved. Mission accomplished. But outside the box score, another scoreboard exists. A scoreboard measuring confidence. A scoreboard measuring credibility. A scoreboard measuring trust between the organization and the people who invest emotionally in following it. That scoreboard matters too, because fan relationships are built over time. They're strengthened through consistency. They're reinforced through transparency. And they're weakened whenever communication feels incomplete or unclear. The challenge for Indiana moving forward isn't simply winning games. The talent on the roster is capable of doing that. The challenge is rebuilding confidence with a fan base that now examines every decision under a microscope. A fan base that cares deeply. A fan base that expects answers. A fan base that has helped transform the Fever into one of the most talked about teams in professional sports. That's the reality of life on the biggest stage. Success brings attention. Attention brings scrutiny. Scrutiny brings accountability. And accountability requires trust. The Fever won the game. Nobody can take that away from them. The stars delivered. The crowd celebrated. Their record improved. But the larger conversation didn't disappear. Because in today's sports landscape, the final score is only part of the story. The relationship between an organization and its supporters is being evaluated every day. Not just after losses. Not just after controversies. Every single day. And right now, that relationship remains one of the most important stories surrounding the Indiana Fever. Let's be honest about where things stand right now. The Indiana Fever entered the 2026 season carrying expectations unlike anything this franchise has seen in years. This wasn't supposed to be a rebuilding season. This wasn't supposed to be a learning year. This was supposed to be the year the Fever took the next step toward a championship. Look at the roster. You have Caitlin Clark, arguably the biggest star women's basketball has produced in decades. You have Aaliyah Boston playing some of the most dominant basketball of her professional career. You have Kelsey Mitchell, one of the league's most reliable scorers. You have depth, experience, versatility, and enough talent on paper to challenge anyone in the WNBA. And yet, after 11 games, the Fever sit at 7-5. That's not a disaster, but it's not exactly dominance either. More importantly, the basketball isn't what people keep talking about. The conversation keeps returning to the same issues over and over again. Coaching controversies, injury report confusion, contradictory public statements, questions about communication, questions about transparency, questions about leadership. And that's a problem, because for a team with championship ambitions, the headlines shouldn't constantly be about everything happening off the court. Now, let me be clear. Stephanie White is not some clueless coach who doesn't understand basketball. Far from it. She earned her reputation in this league. She won Coach of the Year with Connecticut. She guided successful teams deep into the playoffs. She has decades of experience as a player, assistant coach, analyst, and head coach. Nobody seriously questions whether Stephanie White understands basketball. The challenge is something entirely different. Coaching Caitlin Clark isn't like coaching any player she's ever coached before. Clark isn't simply a superstar. She's a cultural phenomenon. She brings millions of viewers. She brings nonstop media attention. She brings independent creators, podcasts, YouTube channels, social media analysts, bloggers, and countless new fans who follow every detail of every game. The spotlight surrounding Clark doesn't disappear when the game ends. It follows every practice, every injury report, every substitution, every press conference, every comment, every social media post. That's the reality of coaching the most visible player in women's basketball. And right now, the Fever organization still seems to be struggling with that reality. Because when communication isn't clear, speculation fills the void. When explanations don't line up, questions get louder. When players appear to tell different versions of the same story, people start wondering why. That's exactly what has happened throughout the season. The Sophie Cunningham situation is simply the latest example. Will Sophie be fine? Almost certainly. Reports indicate the elbow issue had been bothering her for some time. Nothing suggests a major structural injury. Nothing suggests a long-term absence. This is a player who fought her way back from a torn MCL. This is a player who built a reputation on toughness. This is a player who has earned the respect of teammates, coaches, and fans across the league. She's not going anywhere. When she steps back onto the floor at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, the crowd is going to welcome her with the same energy they've shown all season because she has become one of the emotional leaders of this team. That's not changing. What needs to change is the communication. Because every time the organization leaves room for confusion, the same cycle repeats itself. First comes an injury update. Then comes uncertainty. Then comes fan speculation. Then comes media criticism. Then comes organizational frustration. Then comes another round of accusations about negativity, narratives, and social media. And then the process starts all over again. It's become predictable. The frustrating part is that it doesn't have to be this way. The Fever have one of the most engaged fan bases in professional sports. They have one of the most marketable stars on the planet. They have national attention every single night. Most organizations would dream of having that kind of visibility. But visibility requires transparency. You can't invite millions of new fans into the sport and then act surprised when those fans demand answers. You can't celebrate record ratings, sold-out arenas, and historic merchandise sales while treating curiosity as a problem to be managed. Those fans aren't outsiders anymore. They're part of the league now. They're part of the Fever story. And they expect communication that matches the scale of the platform. Until that happens, these controversies aren't going away. Not because fans are irrational. Not because media members are looking for drama. But because trust requires consistency. And consistency requires transparency. The Fever are talented enough to contend for a championship. Nobody doubts that. The question is Whether the organization can stop creating distractions around itself long enough to let that talent shine. Because right now, every major basketball achievement seems to get buried beneath another debate. Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston make history? People talk about injury reports. The Fever win a huge game? People talk about communication issues. A dramatic game winner happens? People talk about conflicting explanations afterward. That's the pattern. And eventually, someone inside the organization has to decide whether that pattern is helping or hurting the team. The good news is that all of this is fixable. Clear communication is fixable. Trust is rebuildable. Relationships with fans can be strengthened. But it requires acknowledging the problem first. Until then, the cycle continues. The Fever win games. The roster flashes championship potential. The stars continue making history. And somehow the conversation keeps drifting back to controversy. That's where things stand today. The talent is real. The expectations are real. The opportunity is real. Now the question becomes whether Indiana can finally get out of its own way and allow the basketball to become the biggest story again.